And I think when you finally get to a point where we have done the right things and it hasn't gone well, but we're going to keep doing the right things and make little adjustments, and you see the results, you think, okay, this is why we did the hard stuff.
You know I love my sports, and you know that me and my family love our Nashville Predators hockey. Today's guest is a sports reporter that also hosts her own podcast. We're going to talk about the lessons that sports teaches us that can apply to your entrepreneurial life. We're going to talk about the importance of mindset. As we share about our Nashville Predators season and how we have, as fans and players and coaching staff, we've had to all learn about more confidence and more resilience, but how that is now leading into our momentum and our era of being relentless. Ann Kimmel is going to also share with you about the lessons that she's learned along the way, the pivots that have propelled her into this act 2 in her life. She's going to share how in those hard times, she took those lessons, she faced those fears, and she is now stepping into her extraordinary. Let's dive into the conversation with Ann Kimmel. Ann Kimmel, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. Thank you for being with me.
I am so excited to be here. I've been looking forward to talking with you for weeks now. So this has been on my radar and at the top of my list.
Amazing. So Ann, share with our listeners a little bit about your background.
My background doesn't necessarily match where I'm at right now. My background is in Christian education and theater. Currently, I cover the Nashville Predators for 2 different media outlets. I'm a sports reporter and a sports podcast host now.
So what I love about your story, and this is what we're going to get into, is this is now your what you like to call your second act. And
Yes.
I think for a lot of our listeners, there's a lot to be said for that. And so we're going to really dive into what your second act is. However, though, on this week in a very cold January, we're going to talk for a moment about the Preds because we are in an incredible week of resilience, relentless, being confident, and we're finally getting some shit done.
Finally.
So let's talk a little hockey shop for a minute. So, which is a little different for our listeners, but go with it. We are 2 girls that love our hockey. We love our pecorine. I'm wearing my Rene. Anne has hers in the background. But let's talk about this season, right? It's been a hard season. It's been a down season. We've not done very well, and we've definitely hit rock bottom. So let's talk about that. And let's talk about the pivot and the change that we've started to see this week.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to cover this hockey season. I wouldn't necessarily say fun, but this has been a season where the Nashville Predators came in. Expectations were so high. They added these players who are Hall of Fame players coming in, and hey, this is going to be the team that's going to make a run to the Stanley Cup. And that hasn't happened. And everything on paper says that's what should have happened, but it's just not happened. And it's taken time, and players have had to figure out their roles, and players have had to get comfortable and build chemistry. And this is a team that would take a step forward and 2 steps back. And it really kind of rattled, I think, the confidence a little bit in the locker room for this team that on paper should be one of the most confident teams in the league. And it's been a season of we're doing the right things, but we aren't seeing the results yet. And that's such a hard place when it's a results driven business. That's a hard place to get up the next morning and say, okay, let's start and do the exact same thing again and hope we get different results. Or what small area can we improve in to get results? And so it's been a really challenging season, not just for young players, but for these veterans. But then, you climb your way out and you slog through the mud, and then all of the sudden the moment that you really are hoping will comes. But it didn't look at all like what the Nashville Predators thought it was going to look like, because they were playing the worst team in the league, the San Jose Sharks. Bless the San Jose Sharks. And this was going to be Nashville's chance to put together 4 wins in a row. And it was on paper, this was going to be an easy win. And the Predators went down 5-1. And a 4-goal lead is pretty tough to come back against. But Nashville got in that locker room, took a hard look in the mirror, and said, okay, we know what we need to do. We've not been able to get the results. All we can do is go out there and do the right things. They went out there and they did the right things. And I had prepped my notes for this game after the second period. And all of my notes for the podcast said the Nashville Predators couldn't get it done. The Nashville Predators failed to do this, that. They came out and staged the greatest comeback in franchise history and won this game 7-5. And it was a great lesson, I think, for them. It was a great lesson for me because it was like, delete document, start new document, because they did what we just didn't think they could do. And I think when you finally get to a point where we have done the right things and it hasn't gone well, but we're going to keep doing the right things and make little adjustments, and you see the results, you think, okay, this is why we did the hard stuff. So here's hoping it's a turning point for the locker room when it comes to the season record. But I do think it's a turning point for the locker room in like, okay, yeah, we were on the right track.
And I think it's such a turning point, even for Preds fans, right?
Oh my
Longtime Preds
goodness.
fans, right? Like all of us who, I mean, I remember the first game when the Nashville Predators came into town. But I also think it's such a life lesson, right?
It
It's a life
is.
lesson of, you think you think you're doing all the right things, you're putting the work in, but you have to keep showing up. And your confidence is wavered, your resilience is definitely tried. And it's like, oh my goodness, why can I not get going? Why can I not get this momentum? And I think that seeing their season has been a beautiful lesson in a life lesson that I think all of us can take. And last year, they brought this whole relentless spirit and momentum,
They
which I
did.
absolutely love. And I hope that, now there's been this reigniting of that. We've got this. We've got this confidence. We've got this resilience. We have this relentless attitude of let's get this shit done. We can do this. And
Yes.
now all the pieces are coming together. And I think we heard it from our captain, Yossi, right? He said at the beginning of the season, we would never have had the
Mhm.
confidence to come back, being 5-1, down 5-1.
Yes.
However, given everything that they've gone through this season, which has been very hard to watch, it's been very hard to, live with them. But we haven't given up. But I think if they hadn't walked through all the things that they've walked through, they wouldn't have had the confidence to lean in that ignited them on Tuesday night.
Yeah. There is something to be said about a shared history of doing hard.
Mhm.
And this team individually and collectively as a group, they have had to do the hard things and they've had to do a lot of mental work. I got a chance to talk to one of the players, Tommy Novak, asking him, what are you learning this season? And it wasn't about like how to pass better. It wasn't about like looking for open ice. It wasn't about forechecking. What he learned this season is I have to come every day with a new mindset. Every day is a new day, and I have to walk into this room forgetting what was yesterday that didn't go well, learning what I needed to do, and come in ready to go again every single day. Jonathan Marchessault always says, I celebrate a win or I get frustrated over a loss until midnight. I give myself till midnight. Once the clock turns 12:01, it is a new day and I have to look forward. And one of the things I love about this job is I love the sport of hockey. I love the analytics of hockey. I love the art and science of hockey, but I love the mental side of this game that professional athletes navigate because I walk out of the locker room after these conversations feeling like, you know what, I'm not a professional athlete, friends, but I just take what I hear from them when they talk about the mental side of the game and I think, okay, that applies to everybody's life. You give yourself until midnight and then at 12:01 you face forward. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in learning from the hard and figuring out how do I navigate my life through the hard.
So many amazing nuggets there, right? Because we're talking about mindset. We're talking
Yes.
about that mental capacity. We're talking about that mental muscle, right? We're talking about sit in the feelings, be in the feelings, but
Yeah.
give yourself that deadline to get out of those feelings and face forward and say, okay, this is a new day. I'm going to take a step forward. I'm going to keep showing up. And I think that, and this is why, as someone who was raised on sports, and has lived in the life of sports, it was always easy conversations with family members and parents and different things like that, because we always brought it back to sports, because that was the analogies that all of us understood. And
Yeah.
I think that for so many of us, we are watching our teams, watching our players do the struggle, do the hard work, and and up until this point, still not seeing that success. Now seeing the success, and it's such a beautiful demonstration of, we're learning what to do, we're also learning what not to do,
Yes.
and taking that with us and saying, okay, now how do we get this shit done? And it's just a really exciting time. I mean, as a mom of two tiny humans that also love their sports, it's provided us so many opportunities to talk about resilience and confidence. And, oh, I had a bad day today. Okay, well, that's fine. You can have that bad day until you go to bed. And then tomorrow's a new day, and let's start fresh.
Yeah.
But what I think is so beautiful is my tiny humans are under 10, and we're having that lesson, but these players are in their 20s and 30s, and they're learning this mindset, the importance of mindset, and the importance of attitude, and the importance of their mental resilience.
It's really amazing to watch, because to make it into the NHL, you have to have extraordinary physical talent. You have to have extraordinary sports talent just to get in. These are the best players in the world. But you are never going to succeed in the NHL or anywhere else, that you are aiming for, unless you have that mental resiliency, and you have to go into it with it, and then you have to grow it. Because look, some of the guys in this locker room, they've won Stanley Cups. They know what it's like to be so successful. And now they're in a season where the things that they've done before that brought them success haven't clicked yet. And you have to go back and lean on, what did I know and what do I know now? And you choose to believe that if I keep doing these things, it will come. And sometimes it's hard to keep that belief when you don't see results. And, we can all relate to that, where you're doing the right things and you're not seeing the results. But there is muscle growth, there's muscle memory that you build in those moments when this team goes out there and they do everything, and one turnover means they lose the game, or they can't quite get that game tying goal, and we've seen that a lot this season. But you build that resiliency muscle. And that's the muscle that's going to get you through this time where the gap between expectation and reality just feels so huge. You just have to trust that mental game. The mental game, it's so interesting. I said to Tommy Novak, you all do so much physical training, but so much about this season and this job is mental. And he said, you know what? It is just as much mental as it is physical.
And that mindset is very similar to entrepreneur mindset, right?
Yes.
Because when you are an entrepreneur, you are a trailblazer, you are a catalyst, you are creating new, you are, innovating, you are creating something that wasn't there before. And a lot of times, as I'm mentoring entrepreneurs, it's this conversation of like, I feel like I'm doing all the right things, but nothing is clicking yet. And I think this is such an amazing lesson for those entrepreneurs listening, in that you got to just keep showing up. And yes, there
Yes.
could be pivots, right? The team has done pivots, right? I love the Friends episode of Pivot, going up with the
My
couch.
favorites.
Totally. And I
Yes.
feel like we've made pivots. Like we're constantly pivoting every single game. We're changing the lineups. We're doing this, we're doing that. And in life, we have to pivot as well. We have to say, what can I do? Can I do this a little better? Can I make this tweak? Is it a mental health? Is it a mental health day? Is it a mental check-in day? Or is it nope, I need a physical component. But I think what is so applicable to this is, as entrepreneurs, we're also saying, okay, that didn't work. Let me try this. Let me pivot and go into this. And I always talk about failing fast and failing forward, because the faster that you can do that process, that agility, it's going to make you that much more ready, but it's also going to continue to grow that resiliency muscle and that confidence muscle. But the fact is, the most important piece is you can't give up.
Right. What is so challenging, I think, sometimes, and again, see this in sports and you see this in life, is some of those pivots aren't ones you would have taken. The Nashville Predators have lost a lot of players this season to injury. That is not how Andrew Brunette drew it up. That's not what the head coach was planning on. And I think you see that in life. We have a plan, and you're talking about entrepreneurs. You have a plan and you have a vision and you have a strategy. And sometimes a pivot comes in your path that you did not plan on. This is not what is supposed to happen next. Those are the really challenging ones. I know I had been in that. I did martial arts for years when I was a mom, and I didn't have any long-term goal, or I didn't have any like medium goals. I had long-term goals like, hey, I want to raise a productive member of society. Short-term goals, got to feed them. Someone's going to call 241 kids if I don't. But there's no like medium range goals. And I found martial arts, and it became this passion for me. And it just became I was a changed person, finding ways to meet these goals. And then I got an injury. Pecorine's injury, as a matter of fact. I had surgery from Pecorine's surgeon. And that was a pivot that I wasn't planning on. Like, martial arts was a huge part of my life. And I struggled for 3 years, 3 surgeries, not being able to go back to the thing that brought me joy and that really changed who I was. But it opened the door for me to hockey. That was not a pivot that I was planning on. That was not the direction I was going to go. But I ended up sitting on the couch recovering from surgery, watching more hockey, reading more, learning more. And then that opened the door to what I'm doing now. But that's not a pivot I would have wanted. The Nashville Predators would not have chosen this season, but they are learning from it. And I think that's what you have to do. It's really hard to embrace the unexpected pivots, but sometimes you're going to find yourself on a path that's even better than you anticipated. You just got to get through the hard.
So you have done a beautiful pivot, because we wanted to talk about your act two and what that looks like. And so you've kind of given us a taste of that, and you embraced that pivot. And, so talk to us about that moment in time when you're sitting on the couch recovering and you're learning all these things. And then fast forward to today as this amazing sports writer, podcaster of the Nashville Predators. Talk to us about what you learned along that way that prepared you for this act two.
First thing, and I will say this, I didn't realize I was learning it in the moment, but I look back now and I think, wow, I gained a lot of wisdom through a lot of junk. Like, in the moment, it did not feel fun, but sometimes trust the not fun moments, because you're going to get like, I got so smart, but I had to make a choice, because I was told, look, martial arts is no longer on the table for you. You can't do it anymore. And I needed to find something that was my passion. And I fell in love with hockey. I'm a late in life hockey fan. I'd never seen a game, never watched a game until I was in my late 30s. And I went to my first game with a friend, and I thought, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Where has this been? And it just piqued a curiosity in me. And you talk a lot about curiosity. What are you curious about when you're sitting on the couch and you are not able to do what you want to do? What was I curious about? I was curious about hockey. What did these words mean? What did this statistic mean? How do they measure this? What does this player bring? And so you kind of embrace the suck, and you figure out, what can I do with the suck? And so for me, it turned into watching a lot of hockey. I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I read they write books about hockey, you all. I read a lot of books, and it became something that I was like, I have lost something that was a passion of mine that made me grow exponentially. But you have to embrace something else. Like, and again, I didn't want to, but you embrace something else. And so that sort of opened up this opportunity for me to learn about hockey. And then I saw a blog that covers the Nashville Predators saying, "Hey, we want writers." I love words. Words are my love language. I love to paint word pictures and I love to connect with people with words, and ended up just submitting something I had written. And that's where I got my start. And, from there, met some people. I think you talk about mentorship. It's huge to have somebody else who believes in you, because my dreams were small until somebody said, "Oh, you're not too old. Of course you can do that." And sometimes you just need somebody to remind you who you are. I always say age is not a disease. I didn't find this passion until the second act of my life, but I love what I'm doing. And I think, it's so great to equip kids with learning resiliency and learning pursuing your goal and dreaming big. But don't forget that that's a life thing. This is a life thing. Like, I'm in my 50s and I'm doing something that I get up every morning and I love to do. So, you know, you go through these terrible pivots. You have to embrace the suck, but you just never know at the end of that what you're going to find. And I can look back now and say, "Oh my gosh, it was all worth it." In those moments on the couch, didn't feel worth it. But just it's embracing the suck.
What is so amazing is you and I have very similar stories
Mhm.
because my passion was ballet. I was a ballet
Yeah.
dancer. 6 knee surgeries later on the couch, pivoting into business and pivoting into what that looks like. And I think those moments, what I've learned along the way is that I've learned to be able to say, "Okay, what am I supposed to learn in this moment?" But early on, I was like, "Why is this happening? Why
Yes.
am I going through this?" So on and so forth. But as I continued to have those struggles or continued to have those hurdles, I've now gotten to the point in life where I'm like, "Okay, I have lived this before. What am I supposed to right? I'm going to feel the feels. I'm going to let midnight happen and then I'm going
Yep.
to pick myself back up. But what am I supposed to learn now?" And I think that's the stamina that comes from when you continue to get knocked down or you continue to be pivoted and stopped and different things of that nature. You all of a sudden, your approach to life's obstacles also changes.
Yes, it's building again, it comes back to like building that muscle. And what's so interesting for me is that this came later in life. And I'm so thankful for that, because I don't think that I had the confidence. I don't think I had learned those lessons younger enough to embrace all of what was possible. I look back and I think, you could say, "Oh, I wish that I had found this in my 20s. I could have been so much further along in my career." I found it exactly when I needed to find it. I was who I needed to be to step into this. And I think you always, when you're at a pivot point, don't just, I had to tell myself, I'm not just who I was, I'm who I'm going to be. And coming into that and learning a little bit more about who you are, you get that through the hard things. We've seen that with the Nashville Predators. These players are learning more about who they are through the challenge of the season. And I think sports is such a great metaphor for everyday life. You to be extraordinary in sports, it's really about showing up every day and doing ordinary things. These players go to practice and they study film and they practice shots and they run plays and they skate and they work out. And those are all ordinary things that they do every day. But when you do those things every day, all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, "This is an extraordinary thing that I'm stepping into." You know, Ryan O'Reilly did not wake up at 3 years old and say, "Oh, I'm an NHL player right now." You just do the ordinary things. It's not a lot of glamour stepping into your next act. But when you get there, I got to tell you, it feels amazing.
Well, and that's exactly what our GST Factor podcast season is all about this season, which is amazing, of stepping into your extraordinary. And it has been such a pleasure. I feel like we could talk for hours and hours. We'll have to have you back.
I would love
Um,
it.
and thank you so much for dropping so many sound bites and nuggets and lessons with our listeners today, because it's just been really encouraging and empowering. And I hope for those of you that are listening, right, that you're able to resonate with some of the things that we've been talking about. To our Nashville Predator fans, we hope that you continue to ride this relentless wave with us here over the next few weeks. And Ann, thank you so much. And we really appreciate you being on and sharing how you have gotten shit done in your life.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the GST Factor podcast. I'm your host, Misha Blaymeyer-Farish. Be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram, as I love connecting with our listeners to hear how you are getting shit done in your personal and professional life. Be sure to visit our website at gstfactor.com, where you can take a persona assessment that's going to help you figure out what type of GSDer you are. There's also a ton of resources and tools for both yourself and your tiny humans in your life. We appreciate you rating and subscribing our podcast episode today. And don't forget to get shit done.